Now the floor is to Daniela Fatarella, Vice Chief Executive of Save the Children Italy.
Good morning, everybody. It is really a pleasure and an honor to be here today. As Save the Children, we are particularly proud and happy to be part of this collaboration, as we see our organization really working with the Center of Human Rights of the University of Padova. So thank you very much for allowing us to be here today and have the possibility to work together. Why this collaboration is so important? Because it strengthens the links between human rights and children's rights. Children's rights are not a given, not even human rights. And when you understand that, you also understand why organizations like ours do think that it is crucial to have the possibility to foster knowledge around children's rights. What do they mean in practice? What does it mean to monitor their implementation and to be accountable towards children? If you think about Save the Children, our mission is in our name. We save the children, whatever it takes, the most deprived, no one left behind. But what does underpin our work every day? It's the Convention of Children's Rights. Save the Children was born in 1999, so 100 years ago. And let me tell you a brief story, the story of a woman, a very powerful woman. Her name was Eglantine Jebb. She founded Save the Children in 1919 after the end of the First World War. She literally stood up in Leicester Square in London with a picture of starving children, German and Austrian children, and she pretended to raise funds for them. If you remember and recall from your stories, memories, what the world was like at that time, there was an embargo for Austria and Germany coming from UK. So she was considered an enemy of British people because she pretended to help children who were considered children of enemies. She was arrested, she was put to jail, and she was processed. She did not want to be supported by any lawyers, and she defended herself. The judge condemned her to pay a fine, and he paid the fine himself after listening to her words. Eglantine was a very young and passionate woman, and she decided she wanted to move on, and the day after she went to the Royal Albert Hall, which is really a big place in London. There was a crowd of Londoners going to listen to her first speech, but not because they were interested in her words. She was an enemy, so they brought with them fruits, vegetables, whatever, because they wanted to throw this stuff against her. Eglantine was really very frightened. She was very young, but she stood up and she spoke, and she raised 10,000 sterlings. At that time, it was a fortune. And she started with this money, the very first Save the Children mission, to feed Austrian and German children. And, if you think about why she was so powerful, of course she was a very interesting lady, and she was very committed, and she was very courageous, and she had fantastic communication skills. But she had a vision, and she was revolutionary on that vision. She thought that children were equal, no matter where they were living. And especially, she had the vision and she conceptualized for the very first time that the child is a right holder. This was extremely innovative for that time. And this was the revolution that Eglantine brought on the discussion, on the international discussion, the children's own rights. And this is why Save the Children works every day on the basis that because children have rights, they need to participate in all the activities that we do. So today Eglantine was also very revolutionary because she wrote the very first Declaration of Children's Rights, which was approved and adopted by UN in 1924. So, the Children's Rights Convention of today was inspired by her work. And what is revolutionary in this convention? Of course, children are deemed to have rights, but why? Not because they are the adults of tomorrow or because they are the future, but because they are human beings today. That's the difference, that they have the rights now because they are human beings today. So when we think about our 100th anniversary, for us it's not a time to celebrate. Of course, we have done a lot of work in the past 100 years, many life-changing projects, many advocacy activities that really change policy and laws in many countries where we work with children. But if we look at the world today, children's rights are very much violated, much more than in the past probably. So this is why, to mark our 100 years anniversary, we decided to launch a very big campaign, which is Stop the War on Children campaign, because we want especially to protect children who live in war zones. If you think about how the world looks today, it's not a very encouraging picture, actually. Many, many countries, including Europe, are dominated by fear. And fear built borders. And borders are built to protect from enemies. But if you think carefully about what enemies means, you can imagine that in many places, people find themselves in the shoes of enemies simply because they are in the wrong side of the world. So exactly as 100 years ago, exactly as when Eglantine stood up in Leicester Square to defend the sons of the enemies, today we want to do the same. And this is why we have decided that especially children that live in war zones see their rights very much violated. There are 420 million boys and girls that today are living in war zones. 1 out of 5 children lives in war. I mean, Eglantine used to say that every war is a war against children. And today the world has failed to defend the most vulnerable. We have to admit that. And if you are a child in a war zone, you have different consequences, direct and indirect. Indirect, you starve, you are not fed. Look at Yemen. Hundreds of children every day are starving. You cannot go to school. You cannot have access to health. You lose your parents, your relatives, your families. You flee your home, your countries. And this is indirect consequences. Direct, you die, you are killed, you are wounded, you are raped, you are abandoned, you become a child soldier. This is happening every single day to 420 million children in the world. So this is why we have launched this campaign, because this is outrageous and not acceptable, and this means that children's rights are violated every single day. What do we want to do with this campaign? We want to ask governments to really put in practice international laws and standards that are there but are not respected. And we want perpetrators of violations to be held accountable for what they do. And we want to take in practice measures like the Safe Schools Declaration to be sure there are places that are safe for children. Because today, I mean, if we look at from the end of the Cold War till today, the number of children that are involved in conflict is doubled. Do you know why? Because the nature of conflict has changed. Conflicts are longer than before. The conflict in Syria is 8 years. It's longer than the Second World War. Conflicts are urban. They happen where children stay. Hospitals, schools are attacked. And conflicts are even more complicated than before because there are different parties involved. But war makers, even if they are state military or armed groups, they are all responsible on this violation for children. Let me tell you another story. I've been to the Zaatari camp in Jordan many times in the last 7 years. Zaatari camp is a Syrian refugee camp which is in Jordan, 13 kilometers from the border of Syria. The very first time I was there, it was 7 years ago, I understood why it's called Zaatari, which means Devil's Land, because it's in the middle of nowhere. What you see, 13 kilometers, is the green hills of Syria, and you are in the middle of desert. Everything was white that day. It was the rocks and the sands, white. It was a very bad day, very cloudy, white. All the tents and the containers, which were home of 140,000 people at the time, were white. So when you enter in this place, it was like being in a known place. And do you know which is the average length of time a person spends in a refugee camp in the world? It's 15 years. It's a lifetime for a child. Now there are many children that were born in the Zaatari camp. So when I was there, I learned that the Zaatari camp is well managed and education is granted for everybody, starting from the age of 6. But if you are a child between 0 to 6, you don't have access to school. So Save the Children is very active in early child education because we believe it is essential for children. And in the Zaatari camp, we ran almost 8 kindergarten. And when I entered the very first one, it was like entering in the other world. First of all, it was colorful. It was full of colors. So you had all this white stuff, and then you entered there, and it was full of colors. It was full of children, parents, and people who were taking care of them. But what struck me most is that that kindergarten, for me, was a place in which children's rights were put in practice. Children had the right to be protected. It was a safe place. They had the right to play. And if you are a child in a refugee camp, don't take for granted that you have a place to play. It was a place where children had the right to education. They had the right to be fed. They had the right to be cured if they were ill. And also their parents had the possibility to learn how to take care of them properly. So for me, the Zaatari camp was a place in which you see the Convention of Children's Rights in practice. And the reason why I'm telling this story is when you will be learning, when you will be studying the Convention, the rights, or human rights in general, don't take them as something which is abstract. There is a lot of places in the world and a lot of things that you can do to protect and put them in practice. And this is why, as Save the Children, we are so proud to collaborate and cooperate with this master, because we believe that only with the possibility to involve different stakeholders, provide information to professionals like you will be in the future, that we can really, really change the world. And probably we are still very big dreamers, but we still pretend we want to change the world. And we still believe that through this possibility of learning, sharing, contaminating, things are possible and children's rights can be put in practice. I want to end with another very strong, let's say, vision that Eglantine had at the time. And I keep telling about Eglantine because she was not only passionate, but she was visionary, and she knew how to put her vision in practice. She said that Save the Children is often told that its aims are impossible, that there's always been child suffering and always will be. We know it. It's impossible only if we make so. It is impossible only if we refuse to attempt it. I believe that if you are all here, there is a little dreamer within yourself. So keep dreaming and keep thinking that only if you believe it's not possible, it will not be possible. But if you have the right tools and if you have the right vision, you can really change the world. So enjoy your course and your study, and good luck for your future.